All right, call meeting to order. Roll call. For Diaz,
Here.
and Rocha,
Here.
Peter Griffin, myself is present. Copy of the agenda. You guys have any comments, concerns, any addition? Entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Make motion.
I'll second. Favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That's this. Minutes.
Oh, I don't have a printed copy, but they were attached. There you go. Any questions?
I do not.
I didn't.
We don't have to pick up the. I think. So just make it different. Today. We obviously have to answer to them.
I think if you've had a chance to review them, you can accept them.
And do approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the April 8th regular meeting minutes.
I'll second that. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It's for April 8th, 2025 are approved. Portion for public comment. Right. Thing this time. So it appears so. Move on to reports. County Commissioner Carl Baxmeyer.
Thank you.
Good for you.
No, I'm here because 4 weeks ago, Bob Gaines and Stuart in German Township, in the township picnic. And I was talking with the German Township folks. Jennifer said, "701, etc. Couple minutes, I can come to the next meeting. So give a little bit of county commissioner's perspective of what's happening. And Bobby was there. Said, "Hey, would you mind if I came by?" Earlier. Townships seem to run pretty well. Didn't really have any reason to darken your doors prior to this. And maybe Daniel can tell you a lot more about the impact of Senate Bill 1 than I can. But take the opportunity to come and introduce myself and tell you a little bit about, from my perspective, how we got to this situation. You have to go back to before the primary, 2024, all of the candidates, either side. Once one of them said, "We're gonna reduce property taxes," everybody jumped on board and said they promised the same thing. And Senator Governor Braun came out on top, and it was certainly part of his agenda to reduce property taxes one way or another. So started with the Senate Bill 1, which got amended several times. And as the session went on, we thought there was pretty much unanimity as to what the changes were going to be. Got further amplified when the budget projection for the state came out. We went from $1 billion deficit to for stat coverage of $2.4 billion deficit. And they had it back and they splashed Health First Indiana. Everybody across the board to a 5% cut. Except for a couple of things. The education was pretty much definitely that got some increase. I think it was the sheriff's reimbursement that our sheriffs get for housing level 6 felony people. I think that got a slight increase as they're calling it. There were other things, big impact was in Senate Bill 1 was the change in property taxes. That most people have heard is in one way, it's just a $300 reductions, up to 10%. $3,000. It's a small reduction.
Yeah.
And then there's the supplemental, they're gonna phase out the open space. Credit, add on, it's all the tax and supplemental.
That's correct.
So in the long term, will be more profit, increased property tax. We can talk about it if you want. I'm not an expert on assessment. Everybody's seen their assessments skyrocket. Most people, I know ours did. And a lot of that are the assessors across the state, their hands are tied in some ways because they can't, they're limited to what changes they can make. And the big change is they have something called the has to do with the cost of building, and the state issues that every year cost table. And the new cost table, in a lot of ways, really drove a big spike in property value assessments. We're more concerned about another changes to taxes, and that is the business and personal property taxes. Before, any business that had $80,000 or more personal property had to pay that tax. A small company, $80,000 of assets, that's not a big business. I was on the Commissioners Association board, and as we talked among ourselves and with other commissioners around the state, everybody was generally in agreement that that was too low. That had to be raised. Most of the discussion is centered on the 500,000, somewhere in there. Well, along the way, the legislature decided no, the minimum exemption would be $2 million. So a business with $1.999 billion in assets, personal property assets, doesn't have to pay the taxes. David's dad is working, working on telling us what that really is going to mean for us in St. Joe County. I think that's too high, but as I said in my state of the county address the other night, and it amplifies why we need to continue economic development, and especially continue economic development for larger businesses. I think it's important that we do that. So that's going to be a real interesting budget session for us, the county, and for you guys, township like it's really a budget season. Something else I mentioned, and I'll stop with this, didn't pass, but there were several efforts to force consolidation of our fire territories. And really, from what I heard, that while it didn't pass this year, even the next year, short session, but that may get with the costs. So one of the things I like to see here. Jerry was a voter yesterday. Richland gave a talk about townships, what's going on in Portage Township. And, like you said, welcome the fact that I called for getting everybody together, the township trustees, the fire chiefs, and talk about it. Before we're forced to do something, and to set something up, we think be more proactive and not wait until the state says, this is what you're going to do, so that we can show hey, we already took an action. So that's one of the things that I've asked for in our state of the county. And talked to several trustees. I didn't have a chance to talk to Bobby about it yet, but I think it would be a good idea to get everybody together and talk about what we can do collectively. Before the state tells us what we have to do. I guess one last thing I was mentioning was just what we got. And
Solid.
Solid. So city representative will be without Hillary. For several sessions now, he has pushed the idea that energy projects should be taken out of the hands of the locals, and the state should determine what's best for counties. Cities, and I'm not in favor of that. Part of it passed, part of it did not, with wind and solar, but he's going to continue to push that, it's my understanding. Might say, what does that mean for Warren Township or any of us here? Well, if a pipeline was to come through with your transmission line, a small nuclear reactor in the future, anything to do with energy except for solar and wind, we no longer have any control over it. Our planning commission, nothing to say about that. So I think that's another important thing that we can look at going forward next year. The boards that aims, well, I promise you, stop. I'd also call for taking a look at transferable development rights. So, what the heck is transferable development right? Well, we have zoning. If you stick to it and you say, okay, this area is so industrial and everything around it is zoned residential, agricultural, and somebody wants to come in, you've seen it numerous times outside of that area. You've made if you grant the rezoning, but if the county grants the rezoning, you've enhanced that person, but you've depreciated other people around you. What transferable development rights, it's essentially anybody with development gets rights that they can then, if you want to develop, well, they wants to develop a piece of property, not only do they have to buy the property, but they have to go and accumulate enough development rights to build in the area that you designate. So we would have more control where development goes with transferable development rights, and you're not telling a farmer, sorry, Charlie, you're not going to get any development, you're not going to be able to sell your land for anything other than agricultural. So I'll have more to say about that with the area planning commission and have more education. I used to be a planner, so I'm somewhat familiar, and several times I urged my clients to take a look at that. It always got shot down. We're talking, got shot down years ago because we didn't have computers. And the pushback we got from the municipality, the county was, I knew that. And, you know, it's a lot easier today. So anyway, we'll have more to say about that. That's all I wanted to say. Any questions?
A lot, Carl. You know, thank you. But let's talk about Senate Bill 1 and Daniel's here too. We're the county. We're pretty good shape for 25 and 26, correct? What we don't know what's going to happen in 27 and 28, which, you know, Senator Dalton's been working on, you know, and then how that's going to filter on down then to us township, because whatever affects the county is going to fix all the other townships. So we don't really know what that number is yet. There's
Trustee, I can tell you this, we did receive estimates from the state of Indiana after they enrolled Senate Bill 1, and Senate approved it, and it went through the House and everything. That provided roughly, let's average it out, $200,000 loss of revenue to Warren Township year over year for the next 3 years.
starting in
26.
26.
Can you repeat that?
About $200,000 for 26 through 28, coming 200 each year. Now, but that's a rough estimate because the state, I say this, they were using numbers from 2024. They were not using the most accurate numbers for 25 circuit breaker, for 25 levies. They were using historical information when they built out their assumptions, their estimates. And so I'd say on average, we will likely have to reduce our levy by a certain amount. We will see less. A levy not reduce. What we ask for may not be 100%. It could be cut down by 4, 5, 6%.
So you're talking more, let's say, to
Just, yeah, just the township.
just one. So how does, say a township like Union or North Liberty, what, you know, I'm pretty sure you've seen their numbers. What, would that be 50,000 for them or 100,000 for them? Because, you know, Warren, you know, thanks to years of what former trustee Tomzak have done and what former trustee Downey has done, have done a nice job building up, you know, the financials here in Warren Township. We're in pretty good shape as of now. You know,
We are, yes. In other townships,
compared to other townships.
it ebbs and flows township by township based on the composition of. So, let's just pick a rural township. It's mostly residential or agricultural. So the majority of the township is taxed capped at more than 2% of the tax rate, right? And so the circuit breakers are relatively small. If you're in a township where there's a whole lot of industrial or commercial entities, companies, then your circuit breaker is actually going to be pretty high, and the future outlook of the circuit breaker impact is tough to predict with this new Senator one. It's a little bit more challenging to predict what the impact will be based on the composition of the tax.
So with you saying that, going back to what Commissioner Baxmeyer said,
Yes.
with, I'm just looking at the fire territory part of it. Getting everybody together and talk district fire territory, you know, and structure where St. Joe County has a district. I think then doesn't that help all the residents of St. Joe County in regards to property taxes? Doesn't that lower, maybe lower some of them? It could.
Yes.
See, like, you know, I know Jason and somewhat, I came up late, but Jason and Steve have had talks with Olive, you know, trying to get Olive to join, you know. They got a lot going on over there, obviously, and, you know, we've discussed it at our fire territory meetings, how many times Warren is supporting Olive. I mean, they're going out there quite a bit, and Chris, you correct me if I'm wrong, you would know, 'cause, you know, you're a Center Township fire. But, I mean, the fire chief now gives us a great report every month, how many times they're going out there to support Olive. And Carla, you would know, I'm for sure, you know, talking to Will Miller out there, Will does a good job, the town of Newport Valley, you know, that work, they're doing a nice job, but, you know, and there's talk about, you know, what they want to do, but again, you can build it, but how are you going to sustain it and support equipment and all that kind of stuff, you know?
I did also read that there will be a cap on the tax rate for any fire territory.
It's 46. 40 cents, you know, and that's not attractive to me to go get out of that, you know, because, you know, Warren, the residents of Warren, we're paying 87 cents, I believe, on the dollar, you know, into this territory, which we're almost footing the bill. We're getting sure we're getting some 40 chapters, they're capped out.
Sure, I don't mention, I don't report of the data, but like I said, 1% residential properties, they're capped at that $1. And so your house is not, you as a homeowner, you're not gonna pay more than that $1 tax rate. And as Commissioner Baxmeyer was saying, there will be some adjustments to the standard and the homestead deduction, and then every resident will receive a $300 credit towards their, is it towards excess value or towards the tax? Towards the tax.
Well, knowing what this group has done in the past in regards to the fire territory and what Carl just mentioned a few minutes ago. Carl, that makes total sense to me to try to get everybody together to start that conversation totally, you know. And sure, you know, when you start getting groups, everybody's got their own, you know, agenda, but, you know, once you get in a room, you start working through things, but I think it's best for what's best for the county residents, because Chris, as you know, down south, you know, with Green and all them down there, Liberty and Madison, they're struggling, you know, they're struggling. But, you know, if you put them all together and structure what everybody has, what kind of equipment everybody has and work through all that, I think it's better for the county as a whole. And going back to what you said, what Senator Soliday wants to do, he represents Soliday, you know, wants to do, well, jumping ahead here, it makes total sense to me, and I know Jason's been trying to do that, you know, and Steve, you know, right? So, what time we meet tomorrow?
And a good example is, as you guys know, New Carlisle, Olive Township. Once Amazon was announced, you know, we started talking to the township and the town. We asked, what do you do? More fire equipment, they don't have any room to put it. Where are they gonna put it? Perhaps in the fire station. But now that this has come along, Senate Bill 1 and also this push to consolidate. Which again, it's not fast, but may. It is, I think it is a good time to look at that before we do that, because as the president's that's spoken to have told me, we can build it, we can use the money from Amazon to build it, buy more trucks, but how do we plan that? Operationally, how do we do that? Funded a study for trails for study that as per community center. We're just in the process of writing that up. If everything comes back to, yes, you can use TIP money to build it, but you can't use TIP money to operate it. And that's what we're gonna have to aggressively going forward. And if David to take whatever this thing I can't do, because they're also changing the income tax significantly. It's established. It's gonna be some real interesting things coming out of that as well.
There ain't the ability of, I don't know for municipalities, either like countywide. So up to 0.4% of the like, to kind of make up for the gap.
Perhaps,
But
that's what they're starting to look at, but it's no longer, you know, to change the limit right now, it takes 2 of the 3 South Bend, Mishawaka, or the county. Some combination of those 2 of those 3. That's been removed. I mean, these cities can do it on their own. So that's gonna be a change too.
that wouldn't be ideal, but I guess it's that much that we can function, you know, that you can get this like countywide to with that route. You have to provide fire service, so yeah, what kind of is with this.
I thought of all this, a complete problem was to try to make South Bend. Sorry, he's here and look at this thing, some of these comments about this.
So Eric gives us something in time. Yeah. So he knows, you know, both sides of it. You know.
It's too young to know John Powell,
Yeah,
but too young to know Jerry Bader. Right.
thank you.
His son is the township trustee in the township.
So going forward, Carl, you know, this budget season is going to be very interesting for commissioners and council. You know, it's Not that in the past they haven't been challenges, but going forward, we're going to be. You've got your work cut out for you.
The whole history.
Yeah.
Thank you. A few minutes of your time, yeah, I should have put your name a long time ago. It really didn't need to. Impose on you.
Anytime.
Took advantage of this.
You're welcome anytime.
It changed so many times, it was kind of hard to, until it finally was what it was. That conversation, then we later, it was completely different, so. Well, obviously, like, if you want to see another township treasury report.
Here's, the proposed sale of the Plumstown Fire Station. You're, only if you wanna talk about that process.
Happy to. And this is to preview a bit, one of the resolutions that'll be before the board this evening. As the board is aware, prior to the construction of this station and the new Station 18 on Quince Road, the township owned two fire stations, the fire station on Crumbstown Road and the one adjacent to the new one on Quince. Those were transferred into the building corporation, the Warren Township Building Corporation, in order to provide for some ad valorem rental lease bonds that provided the financing to construct the two new stations. So as a function of the bond, the building corporation took title to those properties, and then the township has leased them. So now that the two new fire stations are completed and are fully online, the Crumbstown station in particular is essentially surplus property. It's currently not being used, not in it, other than some leftover personal property. It has some potential value to the township from a sales standpoint. And so the proposal that in working with Bobby and I think the thoughts, the board and where the bonds are currently, the thought is to be able to have that building transferred into the name, back into the name of the township, so that the township can sell it and recover well, at least some amount of money. The property is in decent shape. It has value certainly. And so there's a process and procedure for public entities to dispose of property. The first step is for really for the board to indicate that that's what it wants to do. That's first and foremost. From there, it starts the process whereby the board will issue a notice. It will be published in the newspaper. Again, this is all assuming that the board wants to follow through with this process. The process for disposing of it would be a vote to engage that process. There'd be a public hearing where the public would have the opportunity to come before you and tell you whether they like the idea of disposing the property or not. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the board can vote to approve the disposal. And so the resolution that is before you tonight would then direct the trustee to use the two appraisals that have been acquired for the property to prepare minimum bids, a bid packet, so that the public at large and anyone interested in acquiring the property can submit a bid to purchase it. Probably a 30 to 60-day process, maybe longer, depending on interest, depending on how the board feels about the process and procedure. But that's essentially the full context of it, and glossing over some of the technicalities to the procedure in broad strokes. That's what the process requires. So I'm happy to answer any other questions that the board may have about that process. But that's the idea.
Sure, I understand. So tonight we would decide with resolution 7, whether or not to allow boundaries to put all this stuff together, and we would still have another public meeting after the bids come in to decide whether or not.
That's correct.
Public comment.
Yes.
We.
Yes.
Or so allowing the package of bids and all that stuff, that's not tied to thing.
That's correct. Yes. So the resolution 2507, that's before you this evening, or will be before you, essentially does three things. So because the building is still owned by the building corporation, this is something that will be addressed in resolution 2506. There will be a process whereby the building corporation will transfer the property back to the township. Both the building corporation and the township will make a declaration to the bondholders that the new fire stations have been completed, which is a condition under the lease agreement between the two that releases the old stations from the lease, so that the conditions of that, the bond doesn't apply to those any longer. So it's resolution 2507. It essentially says that the board is interested in reacquiring both properties. Two, that it wants to amend the lease in order to ensure that the two old properties are not subject to the lease any longer. And then three, that the board wishes to set a public hearing on the disposal, to approve or deny the idea of disposing, and then at the conclusion of that hearing, then the trustee would be empowered, following the vote of the board, to begin the process of selling the building. Again, these are processes and procedures developed by statute that are designed to keep public entities from fire selling property. There's a process here for the public to be involved, they're public assets, and so that's the process that we launch.
Question like that, about that, talk about this, why you do this, Bobby, everything else about that? If not, you feel free to move on to there. Be there, the website, what's that would be?
We have here this evening Chris Bowman. Here he is, met with Force 5 last week. Chris, was it? Yep. And I know there's been some involvement with the other was met with Force 5 for the past month and providing some information on the website. But Force 5 is just about ready to go from what you saw, Chris. We got together last Friday and Chris tightened up between, they talked their language and go when Chris talked, and Chris has done some stuff since last Friday. You want to take it from there and tell everybody where you're at, Chris, and what we need to do next and what we have done since last Friday, really, where you have done.
Well, Force 5, I saw the website. Anybody else seen the website? Is it on there? So really, the website itself is all but done. Now we need to put it someplace where people can get to it. That's where I'm working with Force 5 and you, to get a domain for that to be on it. We're looking at getting a .gov domain for Warren Township through the state. There's a couple of ways we can do it. You can get it at the federal level or you can get it at the state level. Pretty well went state level, center went federal level. I think state is, there's no real big difference between the two. Although the state did just recently say this is kind of in the weeds a little bit, but currently the Center Township domain, the Portage Township domain, I can control from my own web hosting area. And the state of Indiana is saying that they're going to take that control back. They want those domains, they want their state domains hosted on their servers, as opposed to being out in the wild on somebody else's server. So Portage Township, I think they're kind of work with. But since you guys are just getting a brand new domain, that's great. It's not like it's the end of the world. It's just when you have portages and you gotta give it back to the state, that's technically not fun. But since you guys are brand new, and then, so I initiated that over the weekend, put the application in and, loop Bobby in on that so that we're probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 days away from getting the Warren Township domain set up. And then once that is set up, then the website can go live on the internet and be accessible. It will have, in addition to information about the township, it will also have a page where people can view the recorded board meetings. They can access the minutes of meetings, agendas, and things like that. So it's a very highly organized, very well put together website. In addition to that, then Bobby and I talked about the need for email addresses that are township specific, so that it's not just going to personal email addresses. To that end, the recommendation on my end was to go with Microsoft 365, which is basically your Microsoft suite of things people are pretty much used to using. Outlook, email, and things like that with a Warren Township domain, so it would be first initial last name at that Warren Township domain from the state. And that's gonna depend on when the domain is available from the state, so I can't do a whole lot until that's set up. I was gonna give you, just to show you that environment and how that works. It would, among other things, it would allow you to remote in people. If you had a township meeting and say one you couldn't be here, you could remote in and be part of the meeting, participate here. Email, word processing, right? So it's fairly straightforward.
Then we would record them on YouTube, is that what?
Yes. So this weekend was set up your own YouTube channel for Warren Township. And right now, we are recording this. It's not live. We're recording it and we put going forward. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the statute says it has to be live streamed. It just has to be recorded and stored someplace accessible to the public. So that you're.
Keep talking, I'll look at
it. Honestly, I don't think
This now again, this all falls into what we got to meet by the state statute by July the first.
Right. But I mean, my understanding is by recording it and getting it out on, say, a YouTube channel, Steve's got a different answer. You're compliant with everything you need to do. I think the minutes things also need to be accessible. It's like a web link that says you go here to get them. So from your website, you can either go to that YouTube channel that we set, or they could go to your website and there'll be a page on there that will have a YouTube screen on it. You can just click it, whatever meetings that are in there in the playlist. If you wanted to take it to the next level, you could certainly live stream. That's live stream and record at the same time, so you can kill two birds. You may probably need to kill one of them. And so yeah, that's where we're at as far as basically just getting that domain settled. Working with Force5 to get the website actually transferred into my WordPress environment. So the Force5 had access, I had access, and you probably have access as the secretary. And so we set up all the permissions. And then email will follow as soon as possible. We do need to talk a little bit about telecommunications over at the Lake Team. So that's set up, and we've got a phone number and everything else that can be used for the township.
Archive video is fine. It's in, you can do both, either or. So archival video is perfectly acceptable.
It's got to be out there for a minimum of 90 days. Okay. So being YouTube, you guys made you one out there, I guess.
So we're close. We're real close. Hopefully,
Yeah, I'd say my next meeting, you guys will be
What's the date on compliance? July, is it 15?
July 1 first.
Sure.
Date.
So, you guys don't have any questions like that, probably if you have anything else, we can roll right into that. Next on the agenda.
Well, thank you, sir. What I would say is really exactly what we've just talked about. The reason the owl is here, the reason that we're beginning to engage this process and wanted to do this in June before the law became effective July 1 is to really give a dry run to the use of technology in the board meeting space. The way with the setup that's contemplated here, it complies with the statute. So this will be the new normal going forward. So it's as long as the dry run's successful, I think township will be in a great position to comply with this new statutory provision going forward.
And then once we get teams set up, for example, we could consider explore what the interactive for the public should board. I know we discussed that a little bit.
It's especially helpful, when you have things to present. That's why I was trying to promote into that, monitor up there, because I could share screens and things, and that's something we could do, or you could do in the future. Because that way, if you've got something that copies of things you want the public to see, you can put that on the screen while they're watching it or during the recording. And, I do that for the Center Township. They don't, the reason I just hang around and do it, they've got the tools to do it. They just don't have a whole lot of people who really want to run it. And, so that's, but yeah, once it gets, if somebody likes to do that kind of stuff, it's easy enough to do.
All I got for them.
Talked about that and been access for the past few meetings. So
It's one of those that there are still going to be some people who are surprised by it, and as long as I'm sitting here before you, I didn't want you to be surprised by it.
no. And we've talked quite a bit in fact, some meetings about us trying to be better about transparency, to one out, so that on the website and even live streaming. It's through YouTube or through Teams with public comment, kind of the way the world. If we'd rather run things, but it's certainly heading in the right direction.
And just not to interrupt, I'm sorry, but your YouTube channel is set up and on it yet, of course. But if you're familiar with how YouTube handles work, you go to youtube.com/, put the @ sign, and then it's Warren Township SJC. I'll spell that out, Warren Township SJC. Yeah, so anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
I mean, Steve did a nice job getting it so far and then just stalled and there's a little
Finish like,
us and myself and the board to take this to the next level and get it done, which we had to do.
It's supposed to be about 5 chairs. Does it?
That's very good.
The recording, requirement, it's not.
Yes.
I would assume it does.
Yes.
Whatever.
Yeah, we do the same thing at our meetings, correct? Wendy? Everything's recorded and
sure, Jason.
video, Jason puts it on here, you know, you can go to Jason's meeting.
You got your rolling.
Yeah,
Libraries, airports.
yeah.
All right, well, move on to new business. Our first item, reassignment of board secretary duty. Since our last meeting, we had received a formal resignation from her position as secretary from Wendy after quite a while of doing so. She's got a lot of other stuff going on. So appreciate the time she's put into it, and Emily was willing to pick up that role there. We had talked about how the transfer officially goes. That's way we handled it already is appropriate, or do we have to vote?
We do a vote, we do a formal nomination and vote.
Nominations, I would assume.
Yeah.
So the position is now vacated, so, in new business, I'll make a motion to nominate Emily as the new board secretary.
Second,
A second from Wendy, let's see, we'll do a roll call vote here, Wendy,
aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Aye for me. Motion passes with Emily as our board secretary. Thanks for picking that up.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you very much.
Service and since I came over, I appreciate it.
I do have a question about, like, I know it's you. We discussed the PDF, the capacity PDF uploaded somewhere.
To Gateway, yes, so anytime the board meets, we need to have like signed meeting minutes. And that for the state board of accounts to review, and that's just for the audits thing.
Got it. And then the board book. So, is that, okay. What is that?
I think we were, probably you and I were talking whether that would be really necessary to go, to continue on with putting meetings in that board book, because everything's gonna be online now.
If I may, my recommendation would be, and correct me if the SBOA would have a bone to pick with this, but my recommendation would be for the board to adopt a resolution that identifies an electronic meeting book as the official record of the board, the board's proceedings. And that way, I think you would satisfy an inquiry from the SBOA as to what your book looks like. Statute calls it a book. So there isn't, it's tough to deviate from there, but I think you have some authority to be able to determine just what constitutes a book. And in the electronic world, I think you designated an electronic file space as sufficient for your purposes, and the statute would support it. So that would be my recommendation, perhaps at the next meeting, to formally do so.
Yeah. We're making all those things public anyways, so.
That's right.
Documents there, it's just a matter of, and that.
That's right.
Just bring the book in and just store it with other historical artifacts.
Bobby had that.
Everything's over in the corner at, Old Station 18. We just saw it.
Great. Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
All right, we'll move on to resolution 2025-06. Regarding the appointment of directors to the Warren Township Building Corporation.
Introduce a resolution if you'd like. So there's resolution 2025-06. As you indicated, is a resolution regarding the board of directors for the Warren Township Building Corporation. So as the board will recall, with the building corporation was formed to hold fire stations for purposes of the bonds that were used to finance these buildings. It's a nonprofit corporation. The board of directors, it currently has a 3-person board of directors. That's former trustee Steve Downey, Anthony Van Overberg, and Nate Bishop are the 3 current directors of the building corporation. This board has the authority for the building corporation's bylaws to hire and fire directors at your leisure. Given that we're in a position now where with the potential sale of the fire station and given that the individuals that are currently directors aren't actively engaged with the township any longer, at the time that this was formed, they were, they aren't as much now. So it's prudent for this board to appoint a new slate of directors, to relieve the prior directors of their obligations, and appointing a new slate of directors that are individuals who are closely involved with what the township is doing I mean, primarily just the logistics standpoint of if the board needs to meet, for example, in this circumstance, to approve an amendment to the lease and to approve the transfer of the stations back to the township. You'd otherwise have to track these folks down and provide a public notice for their meeting and get them together. And so I think it's prudent for this board to bring the people who are currently in the fold to be in that position. The recommended slate here, per the bylaws, again, is to relieve the prior directors and then to appoint, current trustee, Bobby Kay, the board secretary, Emily, and then township clerk, Tom, to be in these roles. That's the recommendation. It can be, the only limitation here is the bylaws say that the board of directors can't be more than one member of this board. And for obvious purposes, that you have a quorum of your own board, if you were to get together that way. And so it can't be two of you. So that at least is the recommendation. I think looking forward, the role that the building corporation plays is rather limited, particularly from a meeting obligation standpoint and from a workload standpoint. It just so happens that with the sale of the fire station, this becomes important as to who's there and who you're interacting with. So that would be my recommendation. Happy to answer any questions about the process, procedure, basis, et cetera. If the board is comfortable with the process and the slate, my recommendation would be to adopt the resolution as presented.
I would entertain a motion to adopt resolution 506.
I'll second that.
Motion, we've got a second. Wendy, on the discussion. As far as obviously, I agree with the lineup. Historically, we had township trustee and Ben Berg was on the advisory board at the time, so it's not like we're following any different suit than what it has been. It's just a different cast of characters in those conditions. So if there's any question on why the people chosen, it's pretty obvious to me. You guys are okay with that. Or if you really want to get involved with it, you guys can do more discussion on that. And the roll call. Wendy?
Aye.
Ellen?
Aye.
Very, all right, as well. Passes to adopt resolution 2025-06. It's written. That brings us to resolution 2025-07.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. The resolution 2025-07, we previewed a little earlier in the meeting. This is a resolution expressing an interest in real property and approving the disposition of real property. So the recitals here really set forth as I've described it to you. There's really 4 steps in this process, with the board identifying it as an interest in acquiring these properties, in desiring to amend the lease agreement. And I'll preface this by saying I've been in communication with Phil Vicenda, represented the bond issuer with regards to those ad valorem bonds, mostly to make sure, since it would be an interest of the building corporation to make sure that everything is where it needs to be, so the bondholder isn't surprised, frustrated, upset, whatever the case may be, as this property transaction occurs. A lot of it's admittedly kind of lawyers being lawyers with the language of the lease. It's a pretty straightforward process, but there's hoops to jump through to get there. So affirms the desire to acquire the property, affirms a desire to amend the lease, appoints the trustee as the disposing agent, or the one who would represent the board in helping to prepare the bid packets, to help, prepare the property for sale, and then expresses the interest that the board wants to hold a public hearing pursuant to Indiana Code. This is 36-1-11-3, regarding the approval of the disposal of the property. So I've included in here the township has gotten appraisals on the property already. The appraisals both came out at $328,000. So that's the appraised property value. It isn't necessarily the sale price. There's some other considerations that go into that. If the board at the next meeting is to approve the disposal. But to give you a sense of what realm you're in, that's the number. So again, happy to answer any questions you have. Otherwise, I think this is, to your earlier question, this doesn't sell the station. There are several steps that need to happen before that. This gets the process started. So, with that, my recommendation, the board would be to adopt the resolution as presented.
And really, we really had 4 appraisals for the last 4 years, really, because it's turned Steve, the past trustee had 2 appraisals 2 years ago, and they're only good for 2 years.
Right.
At that time, it was $250 million. That's really $250 million, so 2 years,
The properties increased the value.
As far as Carlos offers, it's a commission will offer us $328,000. We're trying to get that one tonight.
I'll look at the fire station.
As far as the money from the sale of the station, is that paying off other things, or is that money that we hold on to?
The proceeds would be unrestricted in that sense, so they would be, they would go into the general fund for the township and be allocated as you see fit. I don't think there could be a conclusion for using it for debt service if the board so desired. But at the very least,
Yeah, if I may just say one thing, it would have to be preceded into the general fund. It could not be used to make investments.
Which that, I was just thinking that now is not a bad time to have a little extra money during the day, like, I suppose,
Yeah, there we go.
the future, so. Back of that property, it's just sitting there, and the longer we sit on it,
Doing most of other costs, so we're paying, they should get things done there. Some of the utilities, their grass cut and all that, sooner we get rid of it. Better.
is there been any interest that you've heard of?
Steve, back in the, Mr. Downey back in the day told me that he had 3 or 4 people that were interested in it. Especially the gentleman next door, wants to A&J. That means he was interested. So I don't know, we'll just see what we get, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, if the board approves this. Craig Walt's going to handle everything, and we're not going to hire a realtor, we're just going to work through your process, which legally we can.
correct, yeah, the process, if the board starts here, board starts here, the board will then need to hold another hearing that's been noticed in the newspaper that says we're holding a public hearing for this purpose. That can be, is a 10-day notice period there, so it could be as soon as we could get it published, so like 10 days from Monday, basically by the end of the month, you could have your public hearing to approve or disapprove of the disposition. Once the board votes to approve the disposition, then we would issue another public notice and request bids. There's a process that's provided there for what needs to be included and what we're looking for. That's probably a 30-day process to receive bids on the property. And then to the extent that any are received, the board would open them and consider what you want to accept. From there, we engage in a purchase and sale agreement, where we represent the township in negotiating the terms of the purchase agreement. Again, the township is really in a position to say, here's the terms of our agreement. And recommendation is you convey the building as is with as limited warranties and representations as possible. And then with a little diligence, 30 to 60 days later, you've sold the building. So that's an aspirational timeline we're trying to push in the fall, at the earliest. But depending on interest, yes. And so we can handle that process. Statute provides that if you get 60 days out and you've asked for bids, nobody bids, or you get lowball bids that you can't accept, then you're empowered to hire a realtor to market the property, and it's a different channel. And if we get to there, now realtors, like handle the legal aspect of it and handle the bid aspect of it, but actually listing the property for sale is something that somebody else would have to do. So we'll do. If we get to that point, there's a process and a procedure for it. You can hire an auctioneer as well, to do it, but I think it's prudent to start a bid. Let's see what happens.
If, you'd like to make a motion to accept, resolution 2537.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Discussion, further discussion. I already got that out of the way, I suppose. So, the roll call was on that. Wendy? Emily?
Aye.
So, aye. That's resolution 2025-07.
Thank you, board members. Your next prudent move will be to set what date you want to have the public hearing on, so we can publish notice. That'd be a special meeting of the board. Whenever's convenient for you, as long as we have about 2 days to get it to the newspaper, 10 days for when it's published. That's all you need.
All right, we can discuss that amongst yourselves outside of this meeting.
Absolutely. Yeah, and just send me a date. Get it started.
Perfect. Any other new business?
We have Daniel Dalton here from Cinders Dalton. With our third set of eyes on the books. Dan, you have any comments about our financials or give the board any updates in regards to financials?
Maybe just a brief sentence. We're actually operating fairly smoothly from 5 months of the year. When we have seen the May financials, I think we're pretty well caught up, and we have not busted our budget, which is always good news. We should get our tax distributions from the county here in a couple of weeks, maybe even this next week. Yeah, at that point, we will go ahead and pay down our debt service payment, which is due June 30 or July 15th. I can't remember which day exactly. And so yeah, it's been a good year, and we'll, as we build out the budget for next year and the following years, we'll keep in mind these legislative implications, and circuit breaker impacts, everything such as that. So if there are any financial questions specifically, you can always reach out to me and just say, hey, I read this article. What does this mean? And circuit breaker is a weird term that we use in Indiana, but I'd be happy to explain that in more depth later on if you'd like it to. Sure, like a briefer.
Yeah, thank you.
Perfect.
Feels like appears that we have the old business. Took care of everything today. If you want to, board member discussion items. I don't have anything, but again, my apologies for being a little late, I just wrapped up the plumbing project that I could step away from. So, I almost stopped sweating by the time I got here, a little too close, I guess. But I've got nothing else. What did you have? Anything?
I don't,
Emily?
I do, I just wanted to put for the board in consideration to, before the year is ended, put together a survey to establish a needs assessment on township residents. So that we can use that as a basis for any future decisions, like a number of decisions to be considered come before us involving property, community center. So it seems to me a good time to understand the needs of the community and then consider hosting one or series of town hall listening sessions to share those findings with the community and provide them for feedback. I know that in talking with Jason, he's done this pretty regularly for Portage, so I think there are easy ways for us to enact a system for relatively low cost, it seems, to provide a pretty accessible survey to folks that would give us, I think, more data than we have now on hopefully valuable data to better understand the needs. So nothing formal to present, but I just wanted to share that idea for consideration.
Yeah, especially moving forward, the uncertainty of funds, whatnot, I would take to have a need out there that we're not addressing. It's going on better with the website, I'm sure that's a big tie into that.
Absolutely.
Do that digitally, instead of doing something on paper would be very expensive, so. You know, it would be the second phase duty to receive those, certainly cover this one by one, but we don't want to do that either, so it's probably making up digitally.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're all pretty on board with trying to be as transparent as possible. Yeah, I'll just understand.
everything, I can fit in a little bit, top of the note, but been pretty busy at, Warren Township Little League, getting some things done there that getting that the park president there would like to see done maybe a couple years ago, maybe last year. So it's been a lot of time there and put some new lights on. Overhead lights, getting the ones there that weren't working fixed, getting some of the electric GFIs fixed. If you've been out there and saw all the cars out there during their Nelson Sport Pit Saturday, just thinking I'm glad I had a septic tank pumped about a month and a half, you know, for that. I mean, they had to make some money, and good for them because it was jam packed. You could not find a parking spot in that park anywhere. But the next thing that we're looking, we're doing great on rentals, we're keeping busy with rentals. Had some electric work done on the pavilion, new lights in the bathrooms, automatic switches going in there so you don't have to turn them on and all that kind of stuff. But next thing I'm gonna do there is just to let the board know. There's 3 toilets in the women's restroom and one in the men's room. That probably haven't been changed since that building's been built back in the 90s. They look pretty horrible. I just got a quote to paint, you know, the inside of those restrooms, because they look bad, including the floor. A lot of activity going on there, so I think we get a lot of comments on the park, you know, a lot of people go there. You know, it's a little gems. You know, I've got Frederick Chino here, he does a great job keeping it trimmed and mowed. He's very conscientious, let me know what's going on there. But been spending some money, but you know, we had dry well put in because you got a heavy rain back there, and that where you turn around, it's like a lake. It would take 3 or 4 days to drain. The one that was there hasn't been cleaned in a couple of years. Had that cleaned, and I had to do it installed. We went to figure out water anymore, so. Been spending some money, but we haven't, not that we need to spend it, but things that needed to be done, you know, for the better of the park and for the township, so. I'm pleased, you know, I think the next thing too, and I think I'm probably gonna do that painting and stuff towards the end of the year. But the picnic tables, if you've been out there, those metal picnic tables are pretty bad. We're gonna get those painted too before the end of the year. There's 18 of them there that are really dressing up just underneath that pavilion. But a lot of people wanna use that western pavilion too. Got some rentals for that western. So we did have an issue with a gentleman that did rent it about a month ago. He did rent it. We opened the pavilion up and the restroom, the water went out. The constant computer board in the manhole there that's outside the pavilion went bad. Quite costly. They kind of knew about it, but you know, they worked around it, you know, according to the park president and a couple of people that's been around it for a while. They did it intermittently, well, this time it completely went up, there was no water anywhere. And he wasn't too thrilled about that, but I refunded this money, but I wasn't too happy. But things happen, this so happened when he rented it. Even though you had 4 porta potties there that he couldn't use. He insisted on his rental money, or part of his rental money back, and Tom and I talked and we just gave it all back to him.
How much was it?
$50. $50. I was only gonna give him 25, but my clerk said, let's just give it all.
The right thing to
It's
do.
better.
Don't make it nice.
Getting bad,
Correct.
bad press, bad, you know, what you want to call it. And to move, he still has to cash a check.
And he did send me a text, you know, saying that he did send me a text. And I said, well, thank you for your text. Now, according to our legal advisor, he said, really, if you read the rental agreement, we really didn't have to refund him his money.
We drafted it that way for a reason.
Yes. I mean, it was, I forgot that how we know it.
The right thing.
But we were able to do that and still paint the tables, so.
But no, I mean, I've gotten a lot of comments on them. People, they see the changes and things that are getting done, and they're pleased, you know. Carl, you're here, but I did not go through you. I'm sorry, but I went through Councilman Thomas, who represented area, who was supposed to be here today.
And I forgot to say that he called me this afternoon and his daughter-in-law is about to give birth. Right now, she probably has.
But what I want to say, when I put a thanks out to Councilman Joe Thomas, he was very instrumental in helping the highway department put some brine on the parking lot to control the dust there. It's so far it's seemed to help. So I want to thank Carl, thank you and Councilman Thomas for doing that.
Well, thanks, Bobby. I mean, that's our only property. Right? That changes when building board transfers the properties to the fire station.
Yeah.
But otherwise,
The township has the park, the township has some cemetery space. But it's correct, yeah, the 2 fire stations come back to the township, and those will be the 4 parcels, township. owned.
Anybody has anything else, I would take on the motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Emily, second for Wendy.
Yep.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. All opposed? Motion carried. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.